thank you all for coming. You didn't know that we were going to be barbecue, did you? The other thing that I might have rethought had I realized that this has been a fantastic day for the long run, and I might have written on an object that was not a bed. So, I hope the power of suggestion doesn't become overwhelming. But let me just begin by telling you the core of what I'm interested in. I'm interested in trying to extend essentially Jane Bennett's theories of things to the visual object, to the visual image and the word. And so this is an experiment in seeing how that might work, to see these things as things in an analogous way to the way that matter is things. But we won't leave that matter behind. So the subject-object distinction began to break down in modernity for a variety of socio-historical and psychological reasons. I'm interested in a concept described by W.T.J. Mitchell and developed by Jane Bennett in Vital Matter that Mitchell explains as follows. Objects are the way things appear to a subject, that is, with a name, an identity, a gestalt, or stereotypical template. Things, on the other hand, refer to the moment when the object becomes the other, when the sardine can looks back, when the mute idol speaks, when the subject experiences the object as uncanny. The power of a thing to take on the wildness of an animal, the expressive agency of a living creature, resisting its own instrumentalization or mechanization, is what Bennett rather wonderfully illustrates and develops. What I would like to do is to show that the non-human thingly power that Bennett theorizes as a nascent political ecology may be extended from matter to two other often instrumentalized categories, sometimes dismissed as mere products of the human, the image and the word. I want to use Cocteau, there he is in bed with a mask, to demonstrate the active agency of the thingly image, and Joyce to illustrate how the language used to designate things can take on a life of its own. Let us begin with a brief, familiar account of a widespread change. First, there was the Industrial Revolution, which changed not only the way materials were shaped through the advent of manufacturing, but also positioned humans to perform machinic tasks as they might on an assembly line. The machine began to reconfigure itself not only in the objects of manufacture, but also in the human who manufactured them, inspiring Marx to develop his concept of alienated labor. Near the end of the 19th century, the related concepts of the commodity and the fetish were elaborated in an attempt to show how material things were taking on a kind of agency that used to be reserved for human beings. Humans were developing intimate relations with objects, which in turn produced more mechanized, uncontrollable behaviors in humans, such as obsession and addiction. Take, for example, a Silas Marner's relation to gold, and how that gold was ultimately supplanted by the hair of a child. Things had become erotic. Then, the world was rocked by two successive reminders that things could be deadly as well, as countries deployed weapons on a previously unimaginable scale during the two world wars. What happened in modernity, developing slowly over the 19th century and surfacing with explosive force in the 20th, is that the human subject began to be reconstrued as labile, moving back and forth on a continuum of animate things that ranged from the animal to that vital thing formerly known as the object. This change was dangerous, but it was also magical, although the magical dimension has received less attention. It is significant in this respect that Bennett's previous book was called The Enchantment of Modern Life, in which she defined enchantment as a strange combination of delight and disturbance. Jean Cocteau's brilliant film of a fairy tale, La Belle et la Bête, Beauty and the Beast, shot in 1945 to 46 and released in 46, uses artistic objects and images to model for humans a kind of magical agency predicated on affinity with the natural and material world. What James Joyce did 2 decades earlier is to use not magical objects, but an ordinary, everyday piece of furniture, the bed, in order to show how that object comes alive through its relation to lived experience a lived experience apparent not only through the impressions, the bodily impressions made upon it, but also recorded in the words that designate it, and the literature and philosophy in which it is prominently figured. It is significant that Cocteau's film, which she described as a poet telling a story through the medium of a camera, was shot so soon after the end of World War II, because in a sense, his transformations attempted to reverse Hitler's. Near the end of the filming, Cocteau notes in his diary that even the worst intestine squabbles are preferable to an occupation. Earlier, he notes wryly, penicillin and the atom bomb are now the height of fashion. Most importantly, he suggests that what he is doing in shooting this magical film is somehow related to what is simultaneously going on outside it, the Nuremberg trial, in which he finds it impossible not to be interested, even while shut up in his own unreal and private world. It is through the language of objects that we can see the unexpected connection between these two worlds, one of which objectified the human in the camps, the other of which, reversing this, used the film fairy tale as an enchanting medium in which objects, too, come alive. Cocteau implicitly positions himself as a dictator who is in one way parallel to, yet significantly opposite from Hitler. As author, screenwriter, director, and editor, he has an unusual degree of control over the final effect. As he explains, like the teller of a story, he dictates over the characters. Quote, "The rhythm of the film is one of narrative. I am telling the story. It is as if I were hidden behind the screen saying, then such and such a thing happened. The characters don't seem to be living a life of their own, but a life that is being narrated. Perhaps that is how it should be in a fairy tale." In Nazi Germany, select groups of people were systematically dehumanized, branded, transported in cattle cars, turned into workhorses, gassed with Zyklon B, a pesticide used for vermin, and then incinerated in ovens. In Cocteau's film, the dehumanization is a form of enchantment that can be broken, and it is a dehumanization that is socioeconomic in nature. The simplest example of this is the way servants are portrayed as human furniture in the Beast's castle. The servers are human arms that hold or manipulate objects. Or else we could see them as objects that are themselves animated like humans. The candelabra in the Great Hall, which surely inspired the character of Lumiere in Disney's version of the tale, usually hold the candles, but on occasion they leave their candelabra suspended in mid-air to point to something the character needs to see. Madame Laplace de Beaumont's story of Beauty and the Beast is, like many fairy tales, most notably Cinderella, a story of class transformation. It begins when Beauty's father loses his social status with his money, which puts Beauty in the role of a servant. Cocteau amplifies this dimension of the film by stressing how different her clothing is in her father's house from what she wears for the Beast. The clothes of a great lady or even a princess. Cocteau adds a figure to the original story, Avenant, who is a friend of Beauty's brother Ludovic, and who is the lower class version of the Beast. Both are played by the same actor, Jean Marais. I wonder if he's an inspiration for Gaston, but anyway, we don't have to talk about that. Avenant, a name that means affable, pleasant, is a hero without means, just as Beauty is a heroine without means or independence. The film tells the story of their transformation into admirable leaders, a prince and princess expressed at the end by a literal, I'm going to just say ludicrous, transformation. They're going up into the heaven. The key to this transformation is the unification of enchanted, agentic things, riches, treasure, with the love of human beings. Moreover, the human beings are themselves unable to control their own power, either because they themselves are part object or because they are wild. The humans must observe and respect the autonomous power of things, their semi-human agency, and not simply use them for their own ends in order to become more fully human. The autonomous power of things is everywhere apparent in the beast's castle, and his own magic resides primarily in several of his objects or possessions. His glove, his mirror, his horse magnifique, and his pavilion of treasures. His own animality makes visible the isomorphism of the socialized human and wild bestial otherness. When he kills other animals in accordance with his nature, his fingers smoke, evoking the smoking of a gun after it has been fired. His fingers, then, are weapons. His body is a thing, as well as part of a living animal body. Other characters are portrayed as animal, too. When Mila, the character Adelaide, looks into the magic mirror, she sees a monkey. The mirror's power lies in its ability to reflect feelings as well as exterior appearances, but humans must also learn to see those more subtle reflected images. At the beginning of the film, when we see Beauty's image reflected in the floor she is polishing, a shot Cocteau spent 2 hours perfecting, neither we nor she can see anything other than her simple servant's clothes. In other words, you cannot see into her heart. Both actor and audience are also implicated in the dynamic the film explores, the compound nature of humans who are also animals and objects. Cocteau's diary makes it clear that he is, on some somatic level, reenacting the film he is shooting, with himself as the beast and the film as his beauty. Like the beast, he describes himself as so horrible that I am ashamed of ever showing myself. He is having trouble with boils, eczema, and burns from the arc lamps. The audience is also portrayed in the film, mostly through what Cocteau calls living statues that watch the interaction between Beauty and the beast, much as an audience would watch the film in the darkness of a cinema. Cocteau describes these heads, their hair pomaded and beboxed, resting against the capital of a pillar. The effect is so intensely magical that I wonder if the camera can possibly get it. These heads are alive. They look. They breathe smoke. Can you see it? They breathe smoke from their nostrils. They turn. They follow the movements of the artists. You don't see them. Perhaps this is how the objects which surround us behave, taking advantage of our habit of believing them to be immobile. It's interesting because these poor people that played these living statues, he talks about how they fainted, because they'd have to rest their head on a pillow, pillar, and have their face all done up and everything on their knees for hours while they did the shots over and over again. Anyway, interesting. Beauty may not be animal, but neither is she wholly human. She is part rose. Everybody who knows Beauty and the Beast knows this. When her father plucks a rose for her from the beast's garden, the beast is able to demand that the father give him his own rose in return for the one he has stolen. Beauty's kinship with the world of vegetation is apparent in the room she occupies in the beast's castle, which, as Cocteau notes, casts a spell. The set for the room was built in the midst of the remnants of the forest. In Cocteau's account, through its walls of net, invaded by, what's that doing? Okay, sorry, there it is. Invaded by thorn bushes, a whole incomprehensible landscape can be made out. Its carpet is grass and its furniture in the magnificent bad taste of Gustave Doré, who of course illustrated Perrault. I have placed the living statues amidst bushes in the corners on either side of the door, so you can just barely see the vines coming out there, so the relationship between the built environment and the wild environment, especially lush vegetative growth, is apparent. And you can just barely see that this is a carved ram. When Beauty first enters the beast's castle, she glides along the ground without moving her feet. Objects speak to her. Her door says, "Belle, I am the door of your room." And the mirror says, "I am your mirror, Belle. Reflect in your heart for me, and I will reflect for you." The consoling fantasy at the heart of La Belle et la Bête is is that by learning compassion and responsibility, human beings can be transformed into benevolent rulers of a world comprised of other humans, plants, and animals, whose allegiance to the new rulers is free and voluntary. We can see the animal becoming a prince at the same time that the lower class human becomes animal. Oops. Avenant's attempt to steal the beast's treasure, his shattering of the glass roof of the pavilion that houses his magic, also his riches, makes Avenant a dead beast, his affable mane a mere irony, and the beast a living princely ruler. This is Avenant turning into the beast as he dies. Cocteau's film suggests that real leadership is not violent, that liberating transformation may come to those who do not thoughtlessly use things, but who respect the power latent in objects, plants, and animals. Most importantly, it understands the human is compounded of all these things, which is why it is so important to treat them all well, not to possess them or steal them, but to mingle our agency with theirs. Then doors will open of their own accord, and branches part freely to let us pass, as they do in fairy tales. On the other hand, the beast's solitary despair can turn people into mere furniture, beauty into the bed on which he lays her unconscious body. Just as in Elizabeth Bowen's The House in Paris, Leopold's solitary despair made Henrietta no more than the walls or the table. Subjects then can, like objects, be manufactured, and there is a sense in which subjects have their own agentic vitality or magic. This sense of the subject is what Bennett calls an assemblage, after Deleuze and Guattari, of the animate and inanimate is almost comically apparent in the furniture. Beauty's father goes to sleep in a chair in the beast's castle that has a lion's head at the end of the arm. Cocteau writes, "The merchant's hand is sleeping on this lion's head. When the beast's roar is heard in the distance, the hand wakes up and escapes." So, here, the hand has a synecdochic autonomy that allows it to stand for the merchant himself, and at the same time to have a life that is almost independent from him. The carved lion on the end of the arm has a kinship with the roaring beast outside, from which the hand tries to escape. The slippage between crafted or sculpted animals and living ones is apparent in the fact that the beast's gardens are replete with statues of wild beasts. You briefly saw that slide whiz by a few minutes ago. But nowhere is the compound nature of human, partly constructed or manufactured, partly wild and animalistic, partly vegetative, subjectivity more apparent than in Beauty's bed. Not only does it have a carved ram's foot, a carved ram's head at its foot, but the fur coverlet on it moves as if it were alive. And the fact that she sleeps on the bed fully clothed makes her an image of the subject's general unconsciousness of her environment, as the beast and the statues are the ones who are watching. They're the ones that are awake. The human is the one who's asleep. If we look at Joyce's reference to the story of Beauty and the Beast in Finnegan's Wake, we see that he refers to it as booty with the best, B-E-D-S-T. Here, the objectified status of Beauty is rendered by changing her name to Booty, and the relation of the beast with an object turns him into a bed that is also the best. Beast is part bed, and Beauty is his reward, as well as having some relationship to a boot. What is happening here is that language is not only revealing the hidden link between living beings and things, but it is also resisting its own instrumentalization. It refuses to let its significations be confined to those assigned to it by convention or intention. It is like the beast's magic mirror. It shows hidden or suppressed meanings. Language becomes, to use Bruno Latour's term, an actant. It mediates between the object and the idea of the object through the phenomenology of how words look and sound. Moreover, Joyce's sensitivity to the objective dimensions of the subject, its capacity to be reduced to furniture, and to the wayward aliveness of objects, seems to have been primed not by totalitarian regimes, but by the experience of having been colonized. A bed is a place of enchantment. If we define enchantment, like Thomas More in The Reenchantment of Everyday Life, as involving both a dulling of the mind and a sharpening of perception. something that happens in sleep. Jane Bennett, in The Enchantment of Modern Life, expands this definition by calling enchantment a state of wonder that is bound up with the temporary suspension of chronological time and bodily movement. Enchantment, like sleep, produces opposite effects, the sensation of being transfixed and the simultaneous feeling of being transported. Its overall effect is to produce a change of mood, creating a feeling of fullness, plenitude, or liveliness, a fleeting return to childlike excitement about life. Unlike reason, magic is rooted in the natural world, on an understanding of the intimate relation between people, objects, and animals. In Ulysses, as in the Odyssey, the bed is an object of an epic quest, but it is also an animated object that, like books, has the power to enchant. Both are material objects with the capacity to engender ideas. As we will see, in Ulysses, Joyce turns the bed into a flower bed, a table on which to eat potted meat, and a grave. It also, like Molly, sings and is sexual. Finally, it is the book as a coffin for thoughts embalmed in words, a place where bodies and fantasies meet. Joyce makes his book his best bed, as Shakespeare's best bed was his first folio. Joyce's second best bed came from Gibraltar and belongs to Bloom's wife. We speak of putting a finished manuscript to bed, which shows that the bed also designates the destination of writers. Books, like humans, are found between covers. Both offer rest, renewal, stimulation, escape from the consciousness of what is happening around us, and possibly even a kind of transformation. Beds are where the imagined and the real intermingle. The earliest indication that the Bloom's bed is alive comes from the book's connection with the Odyssey. In the Odyssey, the bed is the quick of the home, a telos for Odysseus' journey, the privacy of which Penelope schemes to protect, a symbolic representation of their marriage. Like the quick of flesh, the bed is secret, sensitive, and alive. Yet it is also rooted in the earth, which connects it with the earliest meanings of the bed and makes it immovable. Odysseus' bed is secret, in that no one knows how it was constructed except Odysseus, Penelope, and a servant. The nature of this secret reflects a truth about the marriage of Odysseus and Penelope. Their bed, like their marriage, is a living thing, with a bedpost made from an olive tree. That association with the tree and the earth gives the bed stability while maintaining a contrary association with productivity and growth. For Homer, long before Joyce, the secret bed was a carefully crafted place quite literally associated with roots and the family tree. In Book 23 of the Odyssey, after Odysseus has revealed himself to Penelope, Penelope tests him to see if he knows the secret of their bed, telling the nurse to bring out the bedstead he made himself. And Odysseus then roars, saying, "Who moved my bed? It would be hard for anyone, no matter how skilled, to move it." And here's the account of how he built it. There was an olive tree growing on the site, long-leaved and full, its trunk full as a post. I built my bedroom around that tree, and when I had finished, I lopped off all the olive branches until I had myself a bedpost. I bored it with an auger, and starting from this, I framed up the whole bed, inlaying it with gold and silver and ivory, and stretching across it oxhide thongs dyed purple. So there's our secret. Penelope's heart is melted by his revelation of the secret of our marriage bed, which no one has ever seen. And they went with joy to their bed and to the rituals of old. Having come to the bed they long desired, after making sweet love, Odysseus and Penelope take turns telling stories to each other, and the Odyssey winds to a close. By implication, the bed is a place of storytelling as well as lovemaking, as of course it is in Ulysses as well. As Georges Perec wrote in Species of Spaces, which is, at least at the beginning, partly a meditation on Proust's bed, the bed resembles the page. Now, we are in a position to turn to the bed of the Blooms in Ulysses, and we learn that their bed has something wrong with it. Not only did Leopold get up wrong side of the bed, when at last he returns to it, he enters it upside down. He removed a pillow from the head to the foot of the bed, prepared the bed linen accordingly, and entered the bed. Moreover, the bed's unsettled quoits make it musical, something Bloom wants to have fixed. He heard then a warm, heavy sigh, softer, as she turned over and the loose quoits of bedstead jingled. Must get those settled, really. Pity. All the way from Gibraltar. So that's not an immovable bed. It comes from Spain. The Bloom's bed, unlike Ulysses, is far from immovable. It has been brought from Gibraltar. This bed, appropriately inhabited by two people named Bloom, is both a flower bed and a grave. As the first bed was the earth, theirs provides the reader with a picture of how they and we are grounded, where they came from and where they will end. It is the alpha and omega of this epic day. Its song, a jingle with the potential to jangle as it moves under the woman's body. Fitted with sheets bearing flakes of the potted meat eaten there, as well as the imprint of another strange male body. The bed, like the book in which we find it, is haunted by encounters we do not actually witness. What is this bed? Joyce has obviously thought at length about its roles as refuge, resource, inevitable resting place, and work of art or craft. He thought it through Homer, Plato, Aristotle, Shakespeare, and above all through language. He has made it a material and fictional place where opposites are conjoined, not only life and death, but male and female, birth and death, the beginning and end of the days and life's long journey, a place for sleeping and waking, sex, food, infidelity, music, and dreaming. This mundane, busy, even haunted fictional bed is a work of art where the magic of life and art can effect changes, where the circle can be squared, the stone made to move, the mute to sound, the animate to grow. The Bloom's bed, like the bed of the river Liffey that supplants it in Finnegans Wake, is musical, discordant, stained, and ever-changing, a microcosm of Joyce's books, The Day and the Night. The word bed, and here's where we get to how language becomes an object too, that then kind of makes sex, with the real love. Sorry, I got this going here. The word bed also provides an easy jumping off point for considering the importance of rhyme. A significant number of words rhyme with bed, and the rhymes are important. In the Aeolus episode of Ulysses, under the headline Rhymes and Reasons, Joyce tells us that sometimes a rhyme is not just a rhyme. Stephen wonders, is the mouth south some way? Joyce is directing us to realize that rhymes do indeed sometimes rhyme for a reason. Bed, for example, rhymes with dead, wed, fed, read, and said, signaling that death, sex, writing, and eating form parts of a constellation of related activities. Another cluster of words reinforces the first. Litter, letter, literature, letto, Italian bed, lit, French bed, and read, past participle of lire. What sex, death, sleeping, procreation, eating, and writing all seem to have in common is a relation to digging. According to the OED, the word bed comes from an Indo-European root, which in turn produced the Latin word fodere, to dig, referring to a dugout place or lair for sleeping. The first bed, like the last, was the earth. Grave comes from an Old English word meaning to dig, and in Latin the word for grave is fossa, stemming from the same root as the Latin word for bed. Digging, of course, is also associated with agriculture and therefore with food. Moreover, insofar as human sexual procreation resembles planting, a digging with the penis to implant semen or seed, sex and birth also form part of this constellation of related activities. Joyce demonstrates his awareness of the connection between sexual intercourse and planting in the Penelope episode when Molly thinks about the Prince of Wales's visit to Gibraltar in 1876, imagining that he might have been her father. She muses that he, who had found lilies and planted trees through his love for the aptly named Lily Langtry, probably found lilies there too, where he planted the tree. He planted more than that in his time. He might have planted me too if he'd come a bit sooner, and then I wouldn't be here as I am. If making a bed, a grave, food, or a child all involve digging, then so does literature. Letters, too, were something originally dug or engraved on writing tablets. The word letter comes from the Greek word diphthera, writing tablets or tables. The connection of reading and writing with sleeping, childbirth, and dying is further underscored through the web of words that includes litter. I already mentioned li and letto, and literature, written works to be to be read and or slept through, and also littoral, Littorl, pertaining to the shore, as of a riverbed, something else that is dug. The word book itself stems from an old Teutonic word meaning writing tablet, leaf, or sheet, and it's also related to the Gothic boca, or letter of the alphabet. It is easy to see how a collection of sheets protected by covers suggests a potentially projected bed in which one alternately digs or labors and rests. Now, the most unusual feature of the Bloom's bed is its brass plates and pendant fiber radii, loose and tremulous under stress and strain, the snake spiral springs of the mattress being old. I'll return to the snake imagery in a minute, reinforced by the subsequent reference to the bed as a layer of ambush of lust or adders. But for the time being, I'd like to focus on the loose brass quoits of what Molly calls the lovely old jingly bed. The brass quoits actually speak in Circe. They say, jig-jag, jigga-jigga, jig-jag. Jigga-jig is listed in the OED as an imitative word expressing reiteration or alternation of light, short, jerky movements. The bed, then, tells the story of the trotting that has taken place upon it. By having the bed respond to movement with a jingling sound, Joyce establishes it as a place of music and harmony, while also allowing it to express a more threatening dance or jig that resembles the noise made by a trotting horse, jigga-jigga, reminding Bloom that Molly, like ALP after her, will ride a cock horse to Banbury Cross. Joyce makes the song of the bed explicitly sexual by attributing it to something he calls loose quoits, which is not a term generally associated with beds. What the word introduces are subliminal reinforcements of the bed with female sexuality and death, as well as a suggestion that Joyce's bed is associated with stones rather than the tree of Odysseus's bed. Eden, to Bloom, is an innocent obliviousness to the way that sex and death are intertwined. When he enters a bed with snake spiral mattress strings and viper pendant radii, it is said to resemble a layer of adders, and when we find that it contains flakes of partly consumed food, we can appreciate Bloom's perspective as decidedly post-lapsarian. The forbidden food, here potted meat, with all its suggestions of sexual intercourse and buried corpses, has been eaten. The snake has entered the garden, and Adam and Eve are aware of their own nakedness and lust. The mirage of the promised land as a fertile garden has been challenged by a vision of a dead sea in a dead land, gray and old. Now it could bear no more. Dead, an old woman's, the gray sunken cunt of the world. The word cunt here, I would argue, has an important connection with the quoits that cause the bed to jingle. First, consider the shape of a quoit. Can't believe I'm talking. Okay, that just shows you how the word and the bed are related. So, it's a metal ring that is thrown at a peg at a game similar to horseshoes. Maybe some of you know this better than I do. Quoits, we don't play quoits in the U.S. The shape is that of the vaginal opening, and the fact that a quoit is thrown onto a peg stresses that playful association more strongly. However, the word quoit is also akin to cunt, as well as queen and Chaucer's quaint. Etymologically, quoit seems to be related to prick or spur, like the word quicken. An alternate spelling is Q-U-N-A, the root of queen. Gloria Bertonis associates both words with cuneiform, the most ancient form of writing. She relates that priestesses were known to be accountants or administrators of the Temple of Inanna in Sumeria around 3100 BC when cuneiform was first used, which makes it likely that cuneiform was the sign of the Kunta who kept the books or clay tablets for the temple. Matthew Hunt argues that the CU prefix, which is CW in Irish and Welsh, CO in the Romance languages, signifies female sexuality in Indo-European languages as well as Hebrew, Arabic, and Irish. The CU prefix is also discernible in cow and cunning, both words related to femaleness. The loose quoits then suggest sexual consummation and transgression, but quoit also has another meaning. It is the large covering stone on a cromlech, and cromlech literally means flat, arched stone, believed to be burial markers in Celtic areas. The secret of the Bloom's bed, now known to Boylan as well as Bloom, is not that it is immovable because it was made from a tree. It is that it has quoits or stones that, unlike those of the cromlechs they designate, move or even speak. Like Odysseus's, Bloom's bed is strangely alive, but in a discomforting way. It tells in the language of sex and death what Odysseus' bed tells through immobility and growth, that a bed is a place where opposites meet. This is perhaps the most significant resemblance between a bed and a book, since the earliest books were essentially tablets. Those tablets were slabs of stones like the quoits or the stone tops of cromlechs or grave beds. Beds and books are both paradoxically engraved with life through the digging that produced them and that continues to be enacted in them by its occupants and readers. Each one who enters imagines himself to be the first to enter, whereas he is always the last term of a preceding series, even if the first term of a succeeding one, each imagining himself to be first, last, only, and alone, whereas he is neither first, nor last, nor only, nor alone, in a series originating in and repeated to infinity. Near the end of the book, the narrator evinces an exquisite awareness of the multivalent functions of the Bloom's bed when he describes how Bloom enters the bed at the end of the day. With circumspection, as invariably when entering an abode, his own or not his own. With solicitude, prudently, lightly, the less to disturb. Reverently, the bed of conception and of birth, of consummation of marriage and of breach of marriage, of sleep and of death. Bloom again links beds with death by remembering his father's deathbed and how he pragmatically warmed it with animal heat. In Ithaca, Bloom recalls not the warmth of his father's bed, but the fact that his father killed himself there. An old man, widower, unkempt of hair, in bed, with head covered, sighing. An infirm dog, Athos, aconite, resorted to by increasing doses of brains and scruples as a palliative of recrudescent neuralgia. And the face in death of a septuagenarian, suicide by poison. Bloom's dead father was found with his dog in his bed in Queen's Hotel. However, the bed can be a nest as well as a grave for men as well as women, as we see when at the end of Ithaca, Bloom's bed lays an egg. Not just any egg, but the huge roc's egg, which is the size of 148 hen's eggs from one of the Sinbad tales in the Arabian Nights. According to Arabic tradition, the rock never lands on earth, but only on one mountain in the center of the world, a mountain that by implication is associated with Bloom's bed. Joyce portrays Bloom's conscious mind lapsing into unconsciousness as climbing into bed with all the ox and rocks and night and day. Going to dark bed, there was a square, round, Sinbad the sailor's rocks, ox, egg, and the night of the bed, of all the ox, of all the rocks, of dark and bad, the bright dayler. The egg is simultaneously identified as that of a rock and also of an ox, but rocks and ox, despite the rhyme, have very different characteristics. The rock is the ox is a relative to the penguin in its extent. Here, the language of the book mingles the fantastic and the real, the square and the round, the bright and the dark, the good and the bad, in a representation of Bloom's liminal consciousness as he drifts into sleep. The power to produce a state of altered consciousness is one of the magical properties of the bed, a power generated not only in sleep, but also in reading. The understanding of what Joyce and Finnegan's Wake calls his literary bed, a portmanteau word combining literary and littered, a site of writing, sex, and temptation, emerges in Ulysses through Stephen's argument that Anne Hathaway was unfaithful to her husband, William Shakespeare, an infidelity that Stephen sees as reflected in his bequest to her of his second-best bed and his will. For Stephen, the wife's betrayal is one stimulus that, combined with the death of his father and his son Hamlet, produced Shakespeare's creative potency. There's a paradox in that, but you kind of have to be castrated to be potent. So, all right. As his wife disports with a dull-brained yokel in a bed in Stratford, Shakespeare works to express his sense of loss through his writing in London. Death, sex, and writing all transpire in bed. The narrator in the Skilling Crotus section mockingly plays with the language of Shakespeare's will to accent the action of leaving. He left her his second-best bed because she left him feeling second-best to a dull-brained yokel. Left her his second-best, left her his best of bed, second-best, left of bed. It is illuminating to contrast Stephen's argument that Anne and Shakespeare were engaged in a contest of beds with the analogous but more harmonious view of a contemporary British poet, Carol Ann Duffy, who in her sonnet, Anne Hathaway from The World's Wife, 2000, presents Anne and Shakespeare as lovingly writing with their bodies in their second best bed. In order to appreciate both readings, it is useful to construe Shakespeare's first folio as a kind of bed. According to the OED, a folio like a bed can be no more than a sheet folded once. Stephen reads Shakespeare's writing as a reenactment on paper sheets of Anne's activity in their bed at home, which allows readers to apply his argument to Bloom's situation in Ulysses and to connect Bloom's capaciousness with a heroic, because immensely difficult effort to endure his wife's adultery. Duffy, you smell that? Sorry, Duffy, on the other hand, identifies the first folio with the bed William left Anne in his row, reading William's writing as an expression of their lovemaking in another mode. Duffy treats Anne and Shakespeare not as bed competitors, but as collaborators, writing his works together with their bodies in their second best bed, while guests sleep nearby in the vestment. It isn't until the final couplet that we learn that Shakespeare is dead and that she is remembering their loving bed play. The bed we loved in was a spinning world of forests, castles, torchlights, cliff tops, seas where we would dive for pearls. My lover's words were shooting stars which fell to earth as kisses on these lips. My body, now a softer rhyme to his, now echo, assonance. His touch, a verb, dancing in the center of the noun. Some nights I dreamed he'd written me, the bed a page beneath his writer's hands. Romance and drama played by touch, by scent, by taste. In the other bed, the best, our guests dozed on, dribbling their prose. My laughing, living love, I hold him in the casket of my widow's head as he held me upon that next best bed. Anne is now a widow, and her head is the bed in which she contains their lovemaking. The rhyme of head and bed gently suggests that her head is now their second best bed. It has become a casket or coffin that holds their love, which remains alive in Anne's memory. When Stephen asks why Shakespeare, a rich country gentleman, didn't leave his wife his best bed if he wished her to snore away the rest of her nights in peace, John Eglinton, bed-smiling, recalls that antiquity mentions famous beds. In an episode in which Aristotle and Plato represent the twin dangers of Scylla and Charybdis, Eglinton's mark prompts us to think about how the idea of the bed is related to the material object. And I'm going to actually just compress this in the interest of time. So how about, I'll just say that you have to take my word for it, that in Book 13 of the Republic and in Book 2 of the Physics, essentially Plato and Aristotle do their thing, and Plato proves that the bed has to be the idea of the bed, and Aristotle proves that it can't be the material of the bed because you can't plant wood and grow a bed. But he does say that the bed is the final cause, that which is crafted of the materials that are actually here. Okay? So I've done that. I could have done that all along, couldn't I? Woo. Okay. Now we're really getting to the end. Joyce implicitly situates these differing view of beds as a priori template or as final cause behind Stephen's discussion of the second best bed Shakespeare wills to his unfaithful wife. If we understand Shakespeare's posthumous folio as his best bed, his bequest of the bed that was merely furniture to his wife could signal his recognition of that fact. It is an artistic work, then, that most perfectly balances movement and rest, life and art, object and concept. It was his corpus, his collection of plays, that best testified to his artistic effort to create something innovative, as Plato argued only God could do, or as Aristotle suggested only the wood could accomplish. How can the book do what, on one hand, God can do, create a fresh template or form, while also attempting to do what a woman in childbirth does, give birth to a new life out of the lives of two other people? The idea that the book is a product of labor is memorably demonstrated in the Oxen of the Sun episode, where Mrs. Purefoy lies groaning on a bed with a vinegared handkerchief around her forehead, her belly swollen out. As English literature gestates through the narrative, sex, birth, death, these are all signs of the principle of motion Aristotle associated with nature. The book is a womb and a tomb, a place where the reader's awareness of the world around her goes to sleep and a kind of dreaming takes its place. To read a book is to simulate temporarily one's own death, with the hope of waking at the end, transfigured, resurrected, and changed. When we are above ground, we are bedded in a book of breathings in an effort to kick time. Joyce's books help in blessing the bed pain. They lead us to the bed of trial, on the bolster of hardship, by the glimmer of memory, under coverlets of cowardice, to that glorious and ignoble place where life begins and ends, where motion and rest meet, spancelled down upon a blossomy bed. Perhaps the most fitting tribute we can offer Joyce's Aleph bed, his playbook, is the book of his bed of engraved and glittering letters, is to approach it not only with the determination to dig, with all the effort and pleasure digging implies, but also contemplatively, thoughtfully, as one would enter a sacred place. This appropriately is the way Emily Dickinson greeted what was probably a grave. Ample make this bed. Make this bed with awe. In it wait till judgment break, excellent and fair. Be its mattress straight, be its pillow round. Let no sunrise yellow noise interrupt this ground. Last paragraph. Where does this leave us? With the objects of modernity, as we've seen them operating in Cocteau's film and in Joyce's epic of the everyday. I hope that this brief examination has confirmed Bennett's hypothesis that there is an implicit ethics lodged in a reconsideration of objects, that we cannot appreciate the vitality of things without looking much more skeptically at human agency. She may be right to argue that the image of dead or thoroughly instrumentalized matter feeds human hubris and our earth-destroying fantasies of conquest and consumption. She may also be right in equating affect with materiality, thereby implying that the urge to dominate and subdue is related to a dearth of emotion, a failure of imagination. After the age of reason, what modernity seems to have ushered in is not only an age of commodity fetishism, but a new practice of art in which affect is anchored in the thing, and those agentic things include a new respect for the power of images and words to express themselves in excess of their contexts. In this respect, it is telling that Cocteau insisted that the costumes of his film were as important as the dialogue, because they too could speak, and speak feelingly, more feelingly certainly, than the sisters that in de Beaumont's version are turned into statues at the end. Similarly, the very wordiness of Joyce's Ulysses testifies to the boosting power of language, which is not only a tool for conveying intentional meaning, but which is itself a collection of vital objects, newly charged with history and feeling.